Hey, NBA2K MyLeague fans. In this video, we're going to talk about the MyLeague player training features and how I would suggest you consider using them within your MyLeague. It's not an area that I see a lot of information about, other than people wondering how to use the training stuff that the MyLeague mode provides. And so I'm going to tell you how I would approach it, and then you can kind of modify it for how you feel might make sense for your team that you're working with inside the MyLeague. If you're new to the channel, I am Coach 2K. While you're here, hit that subscribe button and click the bell to get notified whenever I upload anything new. You'll get notified, and be sure to catch my MyLeague series that I'm doing, both the MyLeague My Career and the fictional MyLeague series, both of which I'm running series here on the channel. All right, so let's get in here and let's start talking more about how to use the MyLeague player training in MyLeague. All right, before we begin talking specifically about training, I want to just mention progression a little bit, because how things progress inside your MyLeague as far as ratings go has a lot to do with the progression sliders that you use in your file. As you can see here, within the progression MyLeague settings, you can see there's some in-season training effects. And so I want to point out that I have loaded Barncore's progression sliders within the MyLeague, and I kind of suggest you use those, because I think sometimes people think of training is progression, and it is to some degree, but they're kind of separate things. So you can progress without training, you can progress with training, but how the progression's set up is going to probably most likely affect how your training is in the MyLeague. So I guess the first thing I would do is just realize it has an effect. You don't have to load Barncore sliders in your MyLeague. I just want to let you know that I'm using those in my MyLeague file, and I think it's important to point out because it does have these in-season training effects that you can kind of see how things might affect training. Okay, so I want to get that out of the way first. So let's talk about the next part, which is going to be the staff. Now, when looking at the front office personnel, you're going to see that there's a trainer in the front office staff. And since there is a trainer there, I'm going to assume that that trainer does have some impact on the quality of training that your players are going to receive. And so one of the first things that I thought was important for me was not necessarily to get rid of the trainer, but just to make sure that at least it's accurate with what the real life Pacers have in their front office. And so I wanted to make some changes. In order to make the front office personnel correct, what I ended up doing was using the Sim World roster on the Xbox. I went over and loaded it up on the Xbox, and I looked to see who the front office personnel were in the Sim World roster, and I just copied those people over to the Pacers file. So now we've got accurate people, because before the CFO, the trainer, and I don't even think the scout were right. I'm not even sure the assistant coach was. But in any case, now at least I feel like the front office personnel matches real life. And because the CPU is controlling the trainer in this situation, who it is, I mean, I'm not going to get rid of him just to improve the grade. But if I was running a MyLeague file where I was manually hiring and firing the staff, once that guy's contract's up, I'm going to see how he's been doing, what kind of results he's been getting with the players. And if he's not getting good results, then I would consider getting rid of him. I wouldn't necessarily just hire somebody because they had an A+ rating necessarily. But that's another thing. I just wanted to let you know to kind of keep in mind your trainer should have some effect on the quality of training your players are going to receive. So you at least still want to review it and kind of start thinking about what kind of goals you want to have for that trainer as far as training your personnel goes. Moving over to the training tab, now we're going to take a little bit closer look into how we want to use the training features within the MyLeague. And you can see there's several options here. And we're going to start with player mentorship and have a look inside there. And in this particular file, this is my MyLeague My Career with Justin Denman. So what I decided to do with him was have him be kind of be mentored by Sabonis. And I chose, you can choose some badges here. And so I chose the Putback King, I chose the Relentless Finisher, and I chose the Brick Wall, because I think those are three of the ones that I thought were most important to kind of make sure that if Denman was going to gain any badges or improve any of his badges, those would be the three that I would start with. And so that's how I set up player mentorship. You want to try and use a player from the same position. I wasn't quite able to match it up. It'd be better if Sabonis was more of a veteran, if he was 29, 30 years old, and I think he'd be a better mentor if he was more of a veteran, but I still think it might have some impact here. Some people say this feature's broke. I don't know for sure. In any case, I was going to set it up anyway so that we make sure that it's at least taken care of, and then we'll move on to the next part of the training. All right, so next under the training are the options for team training and player training. So I think one of the things that has kind of been implied by some of the limited information I've found about training in MyLeague kind of gives me the impression that you could load a set of sliders and that would handle your team training for each individual player. And to me, that's a lot like taking, like my son and I, we just went to the gym, and I'm like over 50 and he is, almost 18 years old. Well, our training is going to be entirely different when we go to the gym. We have different training goals as far as what we're trying to achieve. So if we just loaded as a set of global training sliders that kind of affected, all power forwards the same, regardless of where they might be in age or skill level, I think we're really missing the boat. And so that's why I think player training is going to be more important. And I'll go over in a minute how I suggest you go about doing that. But before I do want to talk about the team training a little bit so that we can at least kind of give an overview of what's in there and what might be important as far as, anything you might want to adjust or leave the same, or however you would want to approach the team training part of it. The first screen you're going to see when you go into team training is this team training focus screen. And on the left-hand side, you're going to see the areas of focus for training are physical, tactical, and fundamental. Now, each of these focus areas are tied to certain attributes that are listed over here. So like, for example, strength is tied to the physical team training focus. So if you want to train strength, you could increase that slider training amount if you want. Now, since this is by player type, I kind of get the feeling that individual training, if you set any settings there, that'll override any team training focus. And so I'm going to leave this at by player type. You could, if you want, go into a balance. You could do by specific attribute. You could do custom. You could even load some sliders down here. And you can see that if you hit triangle, I can load sliders, and somebody's, this guy here, higher ratings, 101,000 downloads. But the thing about doing that is that, the training, I think, has to be specific to what your team needs. And while that might work for whatever reason, I don't know that for sure. So rather than just kind of like haphazardly throw something in here, I'm going to leave it by player type and then go into the individual player that I want to train and set up a customized plan for him. And how I'm going to go about doing that, I'll get into more details in just a second. But before I do that, I want to continue the team training screens. You're also going to see here, you have team training intensity for both home, away, before a back-to-back, and after a back-to-back, as far as rest is concerned. You might consider intensity level based on how your players, whether they're rested or fatigued, and if maybe when you're home, set it to high. When you're away, set it to medium. And you'll rest before a back-to-back. You'll rest after a back-to-back. particularly if you've got an older team, you might want to provide your team more rest. So you can see here that the workload now is very high on the right hand side, and so that is something you'll want to experiment with as far as a team is concerned. And then the last screen in the team training area is the team training distribution. You can see it's a balanced approach. It's, you know, a third in physical, third in tactical, and a third in fundamental. And I think, you know, yeah, we could probably really bump up physical and decrease tactical if we wanted, but as a team, I think we're going to continue a balanced approach, because that's kind of the Pacers are kind of a balanced type of team. All right, so now let's get a little more specific and talk about individualized player training. And specifically, we're going to talk about the power forward Justin Denman that I'm using in my career MyLeague series that I'm doing. And you can see right now that he's set up over on the right hand side, player training focus, physical goes by the team, tactical team, fundamental team. And as we noted before, we set that to the by player type. So in his case, you can see here it's set to power forward rebounding, because that's what he's most compatible with. Now, how you find that is you look down at the bottom, you can see the square. I can hit training effects for player, and then I can go down to power forward, and then I could choose what kind of player training I want to use for this particular player. And you can see that it's currently set up for the most compatible, which is power forward rebounding, which is very high. At the very least, that's what I would do for each of the players in the training, is go in and whatever is the most compatible for that specific player, then that's what I would use. Now, I'm not going to do that in this particular case because I want more individualized training than that. But if you go in and at least set it by the type of player that you're looking at, I think that would probably help your training a little bit. And but let's go into a little more detail about this training. Now, if I don't want to do a pre-packaged power forward rebounding training regimen for Justin Denman, which I don't, because I want to be more tailored to him, then I can go in and I can set my own player focus, just like we saw in the team area earlier, for physical, tactical, fundamental, intensity. So, and these already have some predetermined, you can see it's pretty balanced here, where they'll work on just about everything pretty equally. Like here, hustle's a little more than driving dunk, but we can customize each one of these. But if you're going to customize them, you know, where should you customize? What should you focus on? And so let's walk through Justin Denman in a little more detail and kind of show you where we probably should focus with him. Now, here are Justin Denman's attributes. So this is his player card. I went in and selected attributes so we could have a look at his ratings and just see, you know, what kind of training he might need. Now, obviously, he's a young guy. He just came into the league. The position average overall rating is 81, and he's sitting at 73. But we can't train for an overall rating. You'll notice that his shot close rating is 75. The position average is 81. Now, there's a gap there between the position average and his actual rating. So that's a potential area that we would want to look at training him in. So if shot close is important, like in his case it would be, then that's an area that we're going to really think about training him for specifically. Now, you'll notice too, like his open shot mid-range, he's equal to the position average. So in that particular case, if he does any training, you know, he's going to be better than the average player at his position, which, you know, that's what we want, but it wouldn't be as glaring a training need as, say, a contested shot mid-range, where you can see there's a much bigger gap. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to look at each of these things and decide how important they are to you. And in Justin Denman's case, the position average for open shot 3 is 78, but his rating is 48. And I have to ask myself, do I want to make him a three-point shooter that's a pretty large gap to train for. And I don't look at Justin Denman as a stretch 4. So that's probably not an area that is important to me. So if I go down here and I look at some of the things that are important to me, they'd be things like, let's look at a physical attribute like strength. So here his strength is below the position average. So his rating is 67, position average is 74. And so there's a gap where we might want to do that, especially since he's young, he needs to get stronger. I think that would be probably a very important area to focus on right out of the gate. So once we're back in the player training area, now we have a little bit more of a better idea of what we want to train our player for, because we know where he's a little bit weaker. And we want to try and shore that up ratings wise so that he can improve in that specific area. Now you'll notice here, there's a few options on this screen as far as player training. First, you can load sliders. And if you go in here, you'll see things like all around point guard, scoring shooting guard, outside big. And a lot of these things have been downloaded, and I'm sure that they probably have some good things about them. But again, based on your individual player, you're going to want to look and see what that guy really needs. So what I suggest is for example, under the physical, we'll go over here and we'll choose, you can choose, like it's set by team right now, so you can see everything's pretty balanced. And so while strength is a little bit of a bump up and hustle is a little bit of a bump up, I think we want to focus a little more on strength than trying to focus everything at one time. And you can go in here and you can choose by a custom plan for everything. You can do it by player type, which is pretty close to the team settings. You can do a balanced approach, which is equal in everything, which is better than nothing. Or you can do it by attribute. Now notice here under the attribute, if I want to focus on contact dunk, there's 50 units here of training allocated just to improve that one skill. And you can see these others are all at a lower value of 5 units. So this tells me that in order to improve and really focus on one particular category, that 50 units is probably where I want to go. So if I want to improve his strength, so I go down here to strength, you can see that I got strength at 50 and everything else kind of balanced out. And that means he's going to have a player focus of getting stronger. And that's what we want. We want him to at least get up to his position average, if not a little bit higher. Now, if you wanted to focus on 2 areas, if you could take this 50, let's say I wanted to work on strength and vertical, what I could do is I could take this down to like 25, let's say 30, and then I could move this up to like 25. All right. Now I'm just going to focus on one attribute at a time and just see what kind of results I get, and just leave it there. So from a physical standpoint, I've decided that we're going to work on strength, and we're going to see what kind of results that we get with that physical attribute. Now the next area is tactical. As far as training goes, these are things like shot IQ. So you can see his shot IQ is a lot less than his position average. That means that's a potential training area that we might want to, work on. That's a pretty big gap. Things like draw foul. He's below the position average there. Things like passing IQ, that's pretty low compared to the position average. Offensive consistency, pretty big gap there. I have noticed it's a little harder to kind of get him, scoring down low sometimes. That might be something that we might want to take a look at. So there's no right or wrong answer here. It's really just kind of what you want to focus on, because when we go into the individual player training for this particular focus, it's not like we're going to ignore everything else. We're just not going to train it at the level that we might otherwise do. So let's let's go back to that screen here and have a look at that. So after looking at Denman's weaknesses as far as tactical things go, here's what I decided to do. Now within the player training, you can see right now he has the default team. You can do a custom by player type. You can do a balanced approach, or you can do it by attribute. There's also a couple other options here like defense, offense. So I noticed in using Denman, he's a little weak on defense. So as you can see here, if you choose defense, you can kind of focus on several options at one time. And I think in his case, that's probably going to be the best approach for him, because we can try and improve his defense across the board as opposed to like we did with strength, which I think strength is really important in his position. And so what we decided to do here is just go with a defensive profile. Now what we can learn from this profile is that if you kind of want to focus on more than one thing at a time, then maybe 12 units is a number you'll want to go with. So just kind of keep that in mind if you want to try and bump some of these up and do something a little more custom than what I'm doing, just specific to your player. That's something that you can do. Under the fundamental training focus, I kind of opted to do the same thing that I decided to do with tactical, because after playing some games with him, I know that he needs help on defense. And so you can see here, in this particular case, they got 20 on shot block. So that's quite a huge amount. But you can see he's 67 in shot block, so we're going to get more training there. But we don't need as much on box out because he's already a really good box out player. Of course, there's some others that are being ignored, but like here, 39 rating, that's going to get a lot more attention. So you can see that it's a lot more of a defensive focus here, so that he'll improve his defense. And you notice his steal there is at 54, so he'll have a little more training there. So I think overall across the board, I think that's going to be a good approach to take with him on the fundamental training focus. The final focus area is intensity, and here the default is to the team, which the overall workload is very high for the team. And so you can choose that to be, I'm going to go ahead and just choose very high because the kid's 19, 20 years old. So he should be able to train at a pretty good intensity level. And so that's where I'm going to start with him. And then we're just going to see how that pans out. Now, once we've set these things, then we're going to need to kind of keep an eye on them. You can't just expect that, you want to see what kind of results you're getting, see what kind of wear and tear you're putting on the players so that you can adjust the training if you need to. So let's talk about a couple ways to review that. One is, you'll notice over here where it says player fatigue, it says he's fresh. So that's good. So if for some reason he starts getting worn out and fatigued, then we're going to want to change the intensity. And so another place to find that is in the player cards. Let's have a look at that. So on the current injury screen, you can see right now he's not injured. And I think it's a good idea to look at the injury screen, because occasionally you can see where, maybe the body might be going under some more stress. Risk of injury might be higher depending on the amount of training that you do. And you can see up kind of below that 73 there, it says season fatigue fresh. And so that you're going to want to keep an eye on that. We can look at some of the other players here, and everybody's fresh on the team. So risk of injuries based on the durability of the player, but also a little bit of the actual fatigue amount that the body's put under. So I think it's a good idea to keep an eye on those things, so that if you do see a player start to get tired, that you can kind of break off and give him a little bit of rest if you want. Now, once we've set these training options in motion, well, then we're going to want to keep an eye on them and see exactly what happens. So here you can see the player development. There's a team development you can look under there too, but I'm going to focus on player development and go down specifically to the player that I'm looking at here. And if I hit X here, I can look at the physical ones. So I can look at strength, for example, and see that this is before the training was taking effect. He's 23% closer to the next attribute point based on the training that was default. So now we'll get a good idea of looking at, strength and overall defense. We can see how these things will increase, and then once we get things to a certain level, if we can, then we'll want to modify the training for that specific player to start focusing on other things. Like, for example, he can improve his free throws, just as an example. So you'll want to keep an eye on their development. Some of these things, I notice a lot of people when they play their MyLeague files, we're just simming through. All right, we're going to sim through 5 or 6 games here. We're going to sim through this month. And a lot of this stuff kind of gets ignored, where you're going to want to go in there and just have a look at it and see, what's happening with the player. So it might be a good idea just to kind of slow down the simming a little bit and go in there and just have a look at, what's happening on an individual day. I like to take my league pace a day at a time, even if there's some simming going on. I guess one other area here, other than the team development, which is a lot like player development, I didn't go into the team development tab, but that's an area you can kind of look in if you want. As far as the training schedule goes, that's something that you can kind of keep an eye on. If you want to go into, here's a practice day, you can see the intensity, and also if you hit R1 here, it has individual training for all the players. And in the case of Justin Denman, he has his own personalized training set up. Everybody else is kind of under the team specific strategy, which is, different from him. So I'm interested to see how he develops. But you could go in here and you could kind of change some of the, you could change the intensity level if you wanted on this particular day. If you notice the players are going to get are all kind of tired, then for that particular practice, you could go in and just change the intensity for that one particular practice, I believe. Now, if you do change this and go in and look at the next practice and see if it's affected too. But I don't see myself spending a lot of time in here. The main thing that I wanted to do was to go into player training and show you specifically how I would manage training for each individual player and why I would do it that way. Okay, so I hope that overview of how to approach training in MyLeague has been of help to you. And keep tabs on my MyLeague My Career series with Justin Denman, and I'll keep you give you progress reports every now and then on how his training's doing and what kind of training things I'll change over time once I see the results of the training. Now, remember that training is kind of an art here. I'm not an expert on how to train specific people. Right now, this is just my philosophy of how I'm going to approach it in the MyLeague, and I'll make adjustments as I go along based on what kind of results. And remember, training too is going to be a lot based on players too, because players that are 19 are going to respond differently than players that are 35, or players that are higher in attribute ratings won't see as much results from training as somebody who's lower in attribute. You'd think there's more room to grow with somebody who's lower, and not every player is going to have the ability to max out in their particular training. So while you're here, make some comments. Tell me what you think about the training philosophy that I've laid out here. If you're into training, tell me how you approach it, and that'll help other people who come along and maybe find this video use the training features better. So, and also while you're here, be sure and check out my MyLeague My Career series and my fictional MyLeague as well. Those are both a lot of fun, and I'm putting up episodes about those as well. All right, well, I am Coach 2K. I'll see you on the court in the next video. Appreciate you watching, and talk to you soon.